Copper Canyon, Mexico. In 1930, while exploring a mine tunnel, a teenage girl unearths two skulls. One of them is oddly misshaped. Radiocarbon dating tests reveal the skull is roughly 900 years old. And according to a dentist who examined the upper jaw, the mysterious relic came from a child no more than 5 years old. Mainstream scientists insist the deformation of what is now known as the star child skull is due to a genetic disorder, most likely hydrocephalus, a condition in which an abnormal amount of fluid causes the skull to enlarge. But paranormal researcher and caretaker of the skull, Lloyd Pye, says he has ruled out this possibility based on the skull's unique shape.
Wasn't hydrocephalic because it's clear that if you're hydrocephalic, you blow up like a balloon. You don't blow up with a defined shape and with a crease down the middle. You definitely don't grow up with a crease down the middle between two of your suture lines.
But many researchers are not only baffled by the volume of the skull, which measures more than 10% larger than that of an average adult, but also a number of other characteristics they say are distinctly not human.
The star child skull has half the thickness of ordinary human bone, but it's also twice as dense as ordinary human bone, with a consistency more similar to dental enamel. It has bizarre, thick strands in it, almost like there's some extra powerful weave inside the bone. It also has this bizarre reddish residue that appears to be similar to bone marrow, but very different from what we normally see.
There are no sinus cavities, for instance. There are many attachments inside the skull for tendons that human beings don't have. And it appears to be some sort of hybridization. It's part human, but also part something else.
When the star child skull is subjected to forensic reconstruction, the face that is produced appears eerily similar to descriptions of gray aliens.
It has all the physical attributes that are typically described by people who have encounters or allege that they have encounters with gray aliens. It has very unusual eyes. It has expanded parietals. It has a crease down the middle. It has a very, very narrow lower face. Plus, it has that monster brain in that head. When we tried to recover the star child's nuclear DNA, in 6 attempts, no recovery. So at that time, what that obviously indicated was if the star child's mitochondrial DNA was recoverable, that meant it had a human mother. And if its nuclear DNA was not recoverable, then there was something wrong with the father's DNA. Because if the father had been human, you would have had as easy a recovery of it as you did of the human mother. So we knew right then in 2003 something was very wrong with at least Dad. And so we formed the assumption, based on the evidence, that it was a human-alien hybrid with a human mother and an alien father.
But more advanced DNA testing in 2011 revealed something even more shocking. The DNA, not only of the father, but also the mother, did not appear to be human after all. The DNA, not only of the father, but also the mother, did not appear to be human after all.
Once we began to recover longer stretches of the mitochondrial DNA, we found out that they didn't really fit at all. And so now The genetic evidence indicates that it didn't have a human mother. It's just purely alien. It's just purely alien.
This is it, folks. This is history as big as history can be made. This is landing men on the moon. This is proving aliens exist. This is proving an alien was real 900 years ago and lived and died and was buried on this earth.
We better get back because it'll be dark soon and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
So we're the people that believe in the virgin birth, talking donkeys, floating axe heads, men that get swallowed by whales and then regurgitated 3 days later, guys who walk on the water, guys who throw down staffs which become serpents. Do we realize how completely crazy that is? We're the people who sit in these buildings week after week and we listen to this stuff, and then when we go outside the buildings, there's like a huge disconnect switch.
My mommy always said there were no monsters, no real ones, but there are.
Yes, there are, aren't there?
Currently, there are 562 Native American tribes in the United States. Many of them, like the Navajo, Hopi, and Zuni, have stories of otherworldly beings visiting Earth. Often referred to as star beings, these alien visitors are said to come down from the sky to teach mankind. And in some cases, they are even said to mate with human women, resulting in the birth of star children.
The stories of star children are quite common in Native culture. There can be quite a variety of forms of that sort of thing as well. But typically there's a star and a human being that join together and a child is born from that union.
They were then cared for and raised by the Indian tribes until the age of 6, when the star beings would return and retrieve the star children and leave the entire tribe staring up into the night sky, wondering what had happened to them and where they'd gone.
That's quite an interesting story in itself, to give birth to a star child and then have it taken from you.
In the Hopi legend, it is said that the star children will prepare humankind for the arrival of what they call the blue star and the Kachina, or star being, who will arrive with it.
There's a lot of debate what the blue star is. But when the blue star comes, it will crash to the earth. This dwelling place in the sky will crash to the earth. And the blue star Kachina will take off his mask in the village plaza. And that will be the end of the fourth world.
Many Hopi refer to the blue star as a house in the sky, leading some ancient astronaut theorists to suggest that this prophecy is a reference to the impending arrival of extraterrestrial life.
Some Hopi refer to the blue star as a house in the sky or a dwelling in the firmament that one day will descend from the stars amidst a fiery crash. Now, what does this mean? To me, what is described here might be the eventual arrival of extraterrestrial craft. The day they will return will change mankind's history forever, because then the truth will be revealed to the masses in one instant for everyone to see.
Throughout the world, there are children who possess astonishing abilities. In 2002, Sho Yano graduated summa cum laude from Loyola University Chicago at the age of 12. 6 years later, he received a PhD in molecular genetics and cell biology. In 2006, 6-year-old Ainan Celeste Cawley of Singapore, who spoke his first words at 2 weeks old, gave a science lecture about acid and alkaloids. And in 2013, Adam Kirby became the youngest member of British Mensa at just 2 years old, scoring 141 on an IQ test and reading books by the age of 10 months.
Highly gifted children often know things that they shouldn't know. They often surprise us with the things they're able to understand at very young ages. And they're able to bring together disparate pieces of information from history, scientific discovery, and their own experiences and heightened intuitive sense.
Throughout human history, there have been children who stand out for their advanced knowledge and incredible abilities. But are these uniquely talented and intelligent children simply the product of good genetics? Or could there be another explanation for why some children display abilities far beyond their years? Some ancient astronaut theorists believe there are children born here on Earth who have a connection to beings from beyond our world. They call them star children.
Many ancient cultures, among them the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians and many others, describe how some children were born from humans and the so-called gods. Star children are what some consider a new breed of people.
And if the star children have existed here on Earth throughout our history, what is the source of their superior intelligence and unexplainable abilities?
Science tells us that in addition to the 2-strand double helix DNA, there's an additional 10 etheric strands of DNA that is dormant in humans and has been since recorded history. It's highly possible that alien creators have designed us this way, and certain individuals are chosen throughout time to awaken these dormant strands in order to help mankind advance.
Are star children really tapping into something inherent in our DNA? According to geneticist David Reich of the Harvard Medical School, there is, in fact, something mysterious inside us that has yet to be identified. In his study published in the fall of 2013, Reich examined the genome of Neanderthals and another group of ancient hominids known as Denisovans, both of which interbred with humans. He discovered that their DNA, dating back more than 400,000 years, contains an unknown ancestor.
Now, this is incredibly exciting to me because I've always maintained that what some geneticists currently refer to as junk DNA might not be junk after all. And this study proves this in part. DNA is a code. And just because its code hasn't been cracked yet doesn't mean it's actually junk. And to speculate even further, what if this unknown species was not of earthly origin, and every human being already is part alien?
Is it really possible that extraterrestrial beings modified mankind's DNA in the distant past, as ancient astronaut theorists contend? And if so, might certain exceptional people, like star children, have found a way to channel their alien origins?
So yeah, we have David Weatherly here. But David Weatherly, he's been a paranormal investigator, author, and world explorer, and he's been doing this for over 35 years. He's pursued the world of the strange, investigating cases around the country and abroad. I think he's one of these boots on the ground type guys, and he's written and lectured on a diverse range of topics, including cryptozoology, ancient mysteries, ufology, haunting, shamanism, and psychic phenomena. He's also studied shamanic and magical traditions from elders from numerous cultures, including Europe, Tibet, Native America, and Africa. He studied a range of energy systems from shamanic techniques to Hawaiian Huna and Qigong healing. And he studied with the Taoist masters in China, had an audience with the Dalai Lama, and is a Reiki master. So there's another Reiki master for us, Darren.
Beauty. We can add him to the list. Well, without further ado, welcome to the show, David. We're thrilled to have you on tonight.
Darren, Graham, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Black Eyed Kids was scary as fuck.
Was it?
Yeah. It's a spooky book. My wife won't read it. But it's spooky. I read it in a like a segmented time, but it'll creep you out.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm sort of putting that one off for a little while.
Something about those black-eyed kids, man.
Sure, it's it's a really weird phenomena that has come more into the limelight in the last few years. It originally, on the surface, seems to have started in the late 90s, the early days of the internet, when a couple of stories were posted about encounters with these kids. But through researching my book, as I began to explore it, I found out that the phenomena had actually been around much longer than that, just under some different names. And what this entails is these children that, or at least they appear to be children, they show up at people's doorsteps. They show up at hotel rooms. They approach cars and parking lots. And they usually average between the ages of 8 and 13 years of age. They have very pale skin. They're usually attired in drab-colored clothing. Sometimes it's described as looking homemade, or some people use the term that it looks like Amish clothing. So there's something a little bit off, initially even with these kids. And the person encountering the children goes pretty rapidly from, I found there's about 3 stages of it. First is just an uneasiness that something is not quite right, because these kids just aren't acting like normal children would. That uneasiness rapidly goes to outright nervous, antsy feeling, and then it escalates very quickly to fear. The people who are victims of these encounters almost always end up running away from the kids, slamming the door. If they're in a car, they'll drive away. They just want to do anything they can to get away from these children.
Oh, creepy.
And it's very creepy, and this is typical of these encounters. Most people say that the children speak in a very monotone manner, that they repeat phrases. A lot of people feel like these kids have memorized a certain number of phrases. If you try to ask them direct questions, they simply repeat something they've already said. And what they do is they try to get you to invite them in your home. So they'll say things, like, just invite us in. This won't take long.
Brian Bethel is a journalist in Abilene, Texas. For nearly 20 years, he's covered city politics, community issues, and major events. Brian is trained to follow the facts and get to the truth of the story.
Brian is a reporter in that old school style. Brian's not going to be the first guy to go. Somebody says that they've seen something weird, obviously it must be true. He has about the right dose of objectivity.
I have no good explanation for what happened to me at all. And it's one of the most frightening things that ever happened in my life.
In the spring of 1996, Brian was busy covering city council meetings and rushing to file his stories by deadline. Then one evening, he remembered an unpaid bill, one he had to take care of across town that very day.
The parking lot seemed very isolated. There was an eerie sense about it, but it was odd that there was no other movement, no other people. Couldn't see anyone in the movie theater. I did feel kind of a sense of being alone there. I felt a little bit of safety because I was in the light of the marquee. But there was sort of a little strange feeling about the atmosphere. Nothing that you could put your finger on. I just want to get this errand done and go home. I don't really want to be here.
Brian had his head down, writing out a check.
There's this very sharp rap at the door, and it startled me. I look over, and there's two young men standing outside. They might be somewhere between 9 to 14, both of them wearing pullover hoodies. I rolled down the window very slightly and said, "Can I help you?" That's when things began to get just really weird.
Hey, mister.
The older of the pair did all the talking. He says, "Hey, mister, we left our money at home, and we want to see the movie. Can you drive us to our mother's house?" He had this very smooth aura about him, almost a too smooth diction.
Come on, it won't take long.
That you would not expect from a child. Almost immediately, there was this primal, terrible fear that began to grip me. There's something wrong about them. And it's not just the smoothness of the spokesman. Some part of my primal brain is saying, "Run, you fool." I wanted away from them. I was scared to death. I was almost literally trembling, trying to keep myself together in the face of just a couple of little kids. I think he began to understand that I was afraid of them at some level because he started to be reassuring.
Come on, mister. We don't have a gun.
That unnerved me. There was this subtle note there that said that we don't need a gun, mister. All this time, this mounting sense of danger that I am about to die.
Brian suddenly notices his hand is reaching towards the handle to unlock the door.
My hand had sort of strayed toward the car door on its own, a little too close to the latch. I'm like, I don't remember doing that. You're not letting them in. Move your hand away. Was it mesmerism or some sort of hypnotism? I can't objectively say that. And then the spokesman started to get angry.
Mister, we need in your car.
He said, "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay."
Tell us it's okay.
I look over at them. It hits. I see their eyes, and they are cold black, soulless orbs, no iris, no sclera, just one black void.
They were like shards of night, and I am more frightened than I have ever been in my entire life. And at that point, every single thing in me says, get the hell away now.
Breaking from his trance, Brian took off.
I ripped out of the parking lot as quickly as I possibly could, only taking a moment to look in my rearview mirror and see that there was no one standing where the children were. They were gone. It was like that they almost just vanished. I don't even remember the drive home. All I know is that I got there absolutely terrified. I was chilled to the soul.
And similar stories in Japan.
Yes,
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And according to many religions, there's traditions there that believe that an evil spirit cannot enter a household without receiving some kind of an invitation.
Exactly.
Is that true? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for some time it seemed that stories of black-eyed children were confined to the United States, but in recent years international accounts have surfaced, David, and you write about an amazing account of a guy in the UK, in London, in fact, who worked for the government, who encountered some of these kids.
Bizarre encounter.
Yeah.
Bizarre encounter. He lived in he had an upstairs flat. The building was had a security code on the front door. So he had come home, he was in his flat, and he heard a knock at the door. When he answered it, here are these two kids. And he was very puzzled because there were no children in his building. He couldn't figure out how these kids had gotten in. As his encounter unfolds, he has very strange experiences mentally because he's thinking there's something wrong with these kids, but they're insisting they want to come in. He realizes at one point that unconsciously he has opened his door as if he's going to let them in. But then he sort of gets control of himself and he's trying to shake this off and he's thinking, no, something's not right. Here's one of the weird things, Tracy. He looks away for a moment, and when he looks back, there are now 3 kids.
Wow.
They've multiplied.
Wow. Wow.
Really, really bizarre. I've heard this a couple of other times, but you know, this gentleman, he finally got control of himself. He slammed the door, and he heard this weird popping sound.
Yes.
In the hallway, and when he opened the door back up, these kids had vanished. He equated that as them sort of coming and going because he had heard the sound at the beginning of the encounter too. Mm-hmm. And he equated that, again, like a lot of people, he got intrigued about this phenomenon, started digging into different things, and came across the idea of portals. Mm-hmm. And thought, well, these kids came through something dimensional, and this was the sound that, you know, the doorway made when it opened up and they came in.
Right. There was also a kind of weird sound, he said, like a thud, that it seemed these had come from the ceiling.
As if they had fallen down into the space or something.
Into the space.
You know, like a whoomp sound. And the other weird thing was this was kind of funny when he was telling me, he said that the kids seemed like they were putting on a bad British accent.
I was going to ask you about that. Yes, you know, of what the dialect was, the
right.
language.
Right. And I believe they said something to him like, hey, mate, we want to watch telly. And
wow.
Like, you kids don't sound British.
No. That is funny.
But it added to the creepiness of the encounter, right. Obviously, for him. And yeah, he was a government employee. Yep. You know, and nothing quite added up about the situation. But again, this was another person who experienced a lot of after effects after that encounter. Some of these aren't in the book because in fact, I heard from him recently, and he told me that he is still experiencing strange dreams.
Really?
Where these kids, where he sees them walking around in the streets or coming in his building.
It's a very fascinating subject. Like I said, I read your book. I couldn't put the book down, and it was terrifying, some of these accounts that I was reading about. We talked a little bit about how animals are being affected. And you mentioned in your book, David, even a pit bull was scared of one of these kids that came to the door. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a fellow in Texas who came home. He had some grocery bags. Now, his account was that he walked up to the front of his house, and his yard is completely bare. I mean, no trees or anything. So he has a simple flight of steps that go up to his front door. As he's at the door, opening putting the key in and opening the door, all of a sudden he realizes there's a kid standing on the ground by the steps. And he was very startled, obviously, because it was as if this child just appeared suddenly. He turns and looks at this boy, who looks at him and says, "Is it food time?" What do you say to that? Mm-hmm. This guy didn't know what to say. He just sort of, he was completely stunned. He sort of paused and said, he was struggling to say something. And the boy repeats, "I think it's food time. You should invite me in." Now, the fellow did have bags from the grocery store. He had been grocery shopping. As this encounter is unfolding, his front door has swung open. Within his front door is a long hallway that leads back to his living room. Solid wood floors. He hears his dog at the back of the house barking, and he can tell that it's coming closer. He sort of steals a glance into the door and sees this dog charging full bore down the hall for the front door. But it gets creepy because when the dog almost reaches the front door, it tries to put the brakes on. We're talking about a Scooby-Doo scene. This dog is trying to backpedal, but on the slick floor can't do it. And the dog literally tumbled over itself out onto the step.
Oh my gosh.
Jumped up as quick as it could with its tail between its legs, ran back into the house. Now this guy was stunned because this is a trained attack dog. He himself ducks into the house, slams the door, goes around to another room and looks through the blinds to see if this kid is still out there, and the kid's gone. But Tracy, this dog was hiding under the master bed and was terrified. The dog has not been the same since then. He had to drag the dog out from under the bed just to try to get it to go to the bathroom and to eat, and it just kept going back under the bed and hiding. He has no explanation for that. And as Nick referenced earlier, it's very curious when we see these encounters with animals present, because they have a different level of sensitivity, and they pick up on things that we don't as humans.
That's right. So I think, our audience are wanting to know this $1 million question. Has anyone ever let them in?
The creepy question that kind of lingers is how many people have let them in that we don't know about. That was one of the, when the book first came out, Whitley Strieber, in fact, called me, and that was one of the first things he said to me. This unnerves me. How many people did this, let them in, and we don't know. There is one account that's in the book. If you want to hear about that, I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So Tracy, there is one account that's in the book that was a really stunning case. And the scenario was this: a woman was driving home. She had her 10-year-old son in the back of the vehicle with her. She lived in a small rural area. Everyone knows everyone. She stopped by the local convenience store. She jumped out of the vehicle, left her 10-year-old son in the car. She ran inside, grabbed some, milk, bread, or whatever. And we've all done this. She comes back out on autopilot. She jumps in, she's turning the key as she glances up in the rearview mirror. Staring back at her in the rearview mirror, kid with solid black eyes.
Oh my gosh.
This child was in the back seat directly beside her son, which that in itself is kind of creepy.
Yes, it is.
Instead of being on the other
very
side,
creepy.
is right directly beside her son. She was instantly terrified. She jumped out of the vehicle. She opened the back door. She snatched her son out. She ran back in the convenience store. When she got inside, she's sort of stuttering and stammering, and the clerk realizes something's wrong. He's saying, "What's happening? Do I need to call the police?" All she can get out is that there's someone in her vehicle. The clerk runs outside. Here's her vehicle, doors open, engine running, no sign of anyone. He searches the lot. Nothing. This is a convenience store / gas station, wide open lot, no sign of anyone. So again, here's this child that has vanished. Now the story gets more disturbing because she could not bring herself to get back in the vehicle. She couldn't tell the clerk what had happened. She was too shaken up by it. She called her husband. She couldn't tell him on the phone. All she could say was, "Get up here right now." Husband arrives. She says, I can't take my vehicle. We need to switch vehicles. They do so. She drives his vehicle home. He gets partway home and gets in an accident. The last thing he remembers is a foul odor sort of overtaking him, and he blacks out, totals the vehicle, ends up in the hospital. They keep him for observation. They think he has a concussion. He can't explain what's wrong. Meanwhile, the wife is talking to her son saying, "Do you know that boy?" And the boy says, "No, Mommy, I don't know him." And she said, "Well, why was he sitting back there with you?" "Well, I asked him to get in, Mommy. I thought we could go to my house and play." So this child actually issued an invitation at the behest of this black-eyed child. Mm-hmm. The result was not just the accident that the husband had and the totaling of that vehicle, but the couple's 10-year-old son became very ill. They took the child to the doctor. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with this boy. At first they said, "Oh, he's got a flu. It's just a virus." Then the symptoms changed. They said, "Well, wait a minute, his appendix might be ruptured. We might have to operate." Then they said, no, wait a minute, he's breaking out in a rash. We think it's the measles. Every time they thought they had a diagnosis, the symptoms would change. Mm-hmm. Wow. The result was they had no idea what to do with this poor kid. They're just watching him as the symptoms change. And the family finally says, "Look, it probably is just a virus. We'll take him home." Because the mother at this point knew that there was something more sinister at play. Mm-hmm. So the result was the family took the child home. They too reverted back to their traditional religious beliefs. They called some old friends. They started a prayer circle and a vigil around this child. And he was sick for quite some time, but eventually the family believes through prayer this child recovered.
Wow, that's an amazing story.
Folks, I realize that some of you may have a lot of trouble getting your head around what these black-eyed kids are. In my opinion, they are harbingers of what is coming. We are about to enter a very dark time in history. I think everything is reaching some sort of a pinnacle. And these are the first wave, as it were, of what is coming. More and more people are seeing them. And this is why we present this program to you, not to create fear, but to educate and warn of what is coming.
This is it, folks. This is history as big as history can be made. This is landing men on the moon. This is proving aliens exist. This is proving an alien was real 900 years ago and lived and died and was buried on this earth. By the end of this, you're going to want, I think, to share this information that I'm going to give you with friends and people. And when you do that, I guarantee you that the very first thing they're going to do when you try to tell them about it is they're going to go to Wikipedia to find out about the Star Child and find out about me. Now, I call it Wackipedia, not Wikipedia, because it's just wacky. Anything to do with alternative knowledge, anything at all, you cannot trust, because Wikipedia is not dedicated to finding the truth. You think they are. They're not. They are dedicated to supporting the mainstream science view of everything. So that anything at all that veers from that, as all alternative knowledge does, gets hammered. And they do not let the truth go in. They give those articles over to administrators within their system. You try to make a change on a Wikipedia thing that is being dominated by one of them, and it'll be changed back within an hour or two, if that long. They have things that the administrators do in their computers that let them know when any change has been made on a quote sensitive page. And I am, because of my profile and because of the profile of the Star Child, we are super sensitive. So they're all over us. So what I have done, and what I want you to keep in mind, is those two websites. If someone wants to read the Wikipedia article about the Star Child, they can go to the Star Child Project, and I promise you, every single word is on that site, but the truth is under each line, each phrase, each paragraph, whatever. I tell you the truth, and I tell them the truth. And also with the Lloyd Pye website, if they check on me, yeah, it's a little louder now. If they check on me, same thing. Every single word that's on the Wikipedia article, and then my truth, I tell you the truth. Okay? So with that said, let's dive into the actual presentation, which starts in Mexico in about 1930. Now, it begins here about 100 miles southwest of Chihuahua in 1930. By the way, this is where I live. I grew up in Louisiana and now live here right on the water. So I have lived through the oil spill. I have lived through the oil spill. I've lived through Katrina and the oil spill. That's why I'm here instead of here. So anyway, I've just been very unlucky here the last few years with weather. But anyway, so 100 miles southwest of Chihuahua near the Copper Canyon area, a young girl from Ciudad Juarez is right across the border from El Paso. That's where El Paso, Texas is. And her family had come across the border and eventually became American citizens. And she was by that time about 13, 14, 15 years old. And the family was going back to the village for the first time since, because there would be no problem moving across the border and all that with her and her siblings. So when they got there, the kids were all told, do not go into the mine tunnels and caves in this area because it's high desert. If you know northern Arizona, Grand Canyon, if you've never been there, you've seen pictures of it. It's dry scrubland. So naturally you tell a teenager what not to do, and she started scheming immediately to do it. So she got a large basket and told them she was going to go out picking berries or looking for fruit and things, and she just hauled it as far as she could get away from the village to do some exploring on her own, and she found a mine tunnel. And she went in and she found far enough in to where she could still see clearly what was going on, about 50 feet in. She saw a human skeleton lying on its back on the floor of the mine tunnel. Now, a cave, we all know the difference. A cave is all big and squirrely. A mine tunnel is, anybody can see the difference. So she saw that. She saw it laying on the ground. She got a little closer and she saw that there was a mound of dirt beside the one lying on its back. And so she thought that looked like a grave, and she got a little closer and she said she noticed a misshapen hand extending out of the dirt of
what looked like a grave. And sure enough, clearly something was in there. And that misshapen hand, she noticed, was wrapped around the upper arm bone of the skeleton lying on its back on the floor of the mine tunnel. So when she got a little closer, she realized that the dirt was, still clumped and loose. If it's in a mine tunnel, there's no raining to compact it or anything like that. She thought, I could probably scrape it out. And she did. She scraped it out with her hands very easily. And she exposed another skeleton, which she said had a misshapen body. That's all she said. Because she was describing this much later in life, when she had no idea that the few things she was going to say about it would then later become important after her death. So she recovered both skeletons with the idea of sneaking them back into the States and maybe donating them to her high school. Back then, they always had a skeleton on a rod in the biology department. I don't know, some of y'all are too young for that. But so she thought, there'd be some degree of coolness to that. So she gathered all of the bones into the basket, but without a plan for how to do this, how to sneak them in. So rather than just waltz into the village with them, she found a ravine with a tree overhanging it, the roots had been washed away and opened up, so it made like a shelf, a nice perfect shelf with some roots. She tucked all the bones up under there. Brilliant idea, not wonderful hiding place. Except that night, torrential rain came, and for the next 2 days, it rained really hard. When she could get there a day or so after that, they were all washed away. The water had risen, as it does. That's what makes those ravines. That's what washed the land from underneath the roots of the tree, and they were gone. So she walked downstream, and she found in a bush the two skulls, and one of the misshapen one had its lower face knocked off except for a piece of maxilla that was detached but there, and it lost its cheekbones in front of its face, as you see, and the human had lost one of its cheekbones in the tumble to get to that point. So she was happy to have the skulls. So she took them back to El Paso. Easy to sneak two skulls in. So they became souvenirs to her. She assumed it was just a deformed human head. But they were her souvenirs, and they were cool, and she liked them. And she shellacked them, put them in a cardboard box, kept them her whole life. Early 90s, she's dying. She decides, like you would with a pet, she wants to find a home for them. Her husband doesn't like them. So she asks friends, and through a series of friends, they end up with Ray and Melanie Young, who I heard their name anyway, so I know he mentioned those. A couple in El Paso, Texas. Now, the reason they offered them to Melanie was because she had been a neonatal nurse for like 15 years, so she was very familiar with human deformity. And as she looked at that one and held it, she said to her husband, this is not human deformity as I understand it. The bone is too light, all of the features are different, and you'll hear why and all that. And she said, and look, it's got that crease in the top of the head, it's got those big bulging parietals. They were both members of MUFON in El Paso. That's the Mutual UFO Network. They both knew about aliens. So it was just an odd coincidence of circumstance. So she said, I think that skull would fit perfectly in the head of a gray. Because you all know gray aliens, I'm sure the prototypical look of that is what's called a heart-shaped face. They have a crease here, they have a bulge here, and they have a very narrow lower face, heart-shaped. And she said it has all of that. I think it could be the skull of a gray alien. And so Ray said, yeah, it could be. How do we do that? So they put the word out through MUFON, who in the field of alternative knowledge in this country knows about skulls. And my name came up because at that point, the book that I had written was called Everything You Know Is Wrong, and I hope you mentioned something about that. And it was about human origins and hominoids and things like that. And in talking about the hominoids, I talked a lot about skulls. So that was how they called me in. I took a look at it. I said, well, it's probably a deformity, almost certainly a deformity. I don't know what kind. I've never seen any of this before, but the odds on it being an alien, I think, are just zillion to one. And so let's go with the assumption that it's a deformity, but I'll take it out and I'll confirm what that deformity is. And I said, it shouldn't take more than a few months, 6 months at max. And here I am, it'll be 12 years in February. So it's, I was completely wrong about that time estimate. But it turned out to be a lot more complex than I thought it would be. Nonetheless, so I took it out and began the process of finding out about it, about its physiology. And that was a long, complicated, convoluted process. Well, let's start with looking at the front view. Now, these are the real ones. These are copies. These are stereolithographic copies, what you see up here and what you will hold. They're exact copies, I mean exact, as close as science can get them, same weight, same everything. But this is the real deal here. Now, if you notice, the differences are, and I can show you here with this, a normal human eye socket, see that? It's 2 inches, 2 knuckles deep, to go back to the foramens and back. With a star child, you can see that it doesn't even go quite 1. It's very much shallower. So you have a real difference there. If you look at the brow ridges, all humans, all primates have varying degrees of brow ridges. You see those, you feel your own, everybody's got them. And then every human nose comes down, no matter how big your honker, it's going to have a little dip up here between the brow ridge and the beginning of the nose. Star Child has neither of those. It has no brow ridges, as you can see. I mean, you look at it, absolutely flat, and you see that its nose has no dip at all. It goes straight down. You'll be able to see it when you come up closer. But anyway, take my word for it. A complete difference there. The there are no sinuses under here, as you will see in another slide. So we're already into some really significant differences. Mastoid bone, much lower. This here, the pterygoid plate, I always have to mention that because everybody sees it and they say, well, those things sticking out like that. The pterygoid plate is just a bracing bone. You see how it braces up against this? If you take a real hard shot in the grill, boom! If you don't have those bones there protecting you, it'll jam right back in, go right into your brainstem and kill you. It's just a protective measure. Nature's wonderful in its design, it really is. Here we see the rear view, and this, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back because it's important to say one thing. See the inion, this knot here, this is important to mention. Feel, everybody do this. Reach around the back of your head and feel this knot that we all have back here. That is where our neck connects to our head. All primates have that. If you've got a head sitting on a neck, whatever the angle, whether you're a quadruped, biped, whatever, you have that where your neck is connecting in with a couple of really big muscles. The star child does not have that. And not only does it not have that, it has a dent. You can see it very clearly and you can feel it. It's got an actual dent instead of the bump that it should have. A very significant difference. And as you see, it's missing. That's where it is, right there. Now this is the occipital bone of a human, normal human, and this is its inion. This is the bump that you ought to have, and these are the fossa with the big muscle attachment points you see right there. Very normal, parietal, occipital. You see the star child's has been just like stretched upward in a completely different design, and you have this crease. You see the rounding of the crown, we all have that, but the star child doesn't. It has a noticeable, distinctive crease. You can't miss it. You can't miss it. And that's, again, a different genetic code, a different set of genetic instructions coming in to make it grow that way. Balance points of the craniums. Now this is interesting and important to understand. A human being is balanced well back of the center point. It's like a fat kid and a skinny kid on a seesaw. And the skinny kid is the cause because we're hollow up here. We have big frontal sinuses in here. We have those big deep eye sockets that you saw taking up a lot of room. We have our nasal passages. We have our mouths. So from here forward, there's a lot of empty space. And all this is just solid bone and brain back here. So the balance point has to be back from center for us to comfortably hold our heads upright on our spines and on our necks. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's very negative about the whole thing, but he's kind of willing to talk as long as I won't tell his name. He just got into it. He just grumble, and wow, this is really weird. So this is what came out of it. He wanted to measure the craniums to see how big the brains were, right? Now, as we sit here in this room, we're all about 1,400 cubic centimeters. That's the average, 1,400 cubic centimeters. But because these were small, he said these ought to be about 1,200, about his size. About 1,200 cubic centimeters. All right? So he took the human brain, and you put a bag in, and you pour flaxseed in, you pour the flaxseed out, and you pour it into a measuring thing, and you can tell just how much. Measured it out right at 1,200. He's a brain guy. He knows what he's looking at. So he said, well, that ought to be 1,200 too. So pour the flaxseed in, pour. It's about 1,200. Pour. Wow. Pour. Wow. Pours it out. 1,600 cubic centimeters. Now, figure it out, because we haven't yet. 1,200 cubic centimeters in a brain in this head, or a head like this. 1,400 cubic centimeters in all of ours, and somehow 1,600 cubic centimeters in here. Now, it really doesn't make sense for a number of reasons, and we still don't really understand it. Obviously, the thinness of the bone. Oh, I haven't mentioned this. The bone of the star child is at least half as thick as normal human bone. It weighs half as much, which you'll feel. And so the thinness of the bone adds some. The lack of sinuses adds some. The lack of depth of eye sockets adds some. But this takes away. This adds, but it doesn't balance up. It doesn't add up to fully 1/3 more. It's a real mystery. But in the star child, he noticed that those sulcuses are just like with the missing Indian. They're worn down to almost nothing. And because of the design of this, he said, you know, that brain should have slid right out of the foramen magnum. The way it's designed, and all that extra bulk to it carried back there. Because when you have hydrocephaly, for example, where you have great pressure in your head, that's what kills you. It's the pushing of your cerebellum out of your foramen magnum, and it kills you. So he said, that brain, that cerebellum it's just not there, or it's made of a material that is very unlike our brains. It's much harder. Wow. That day I walked out, I had slowly been moving away from the idea that it was a deformity. When I walked out of that meeting, I knew it wasn't a deformity. You can't have that, a different kind of brain, and be a human. So, raised. Exterior surfaces, this is amazing. Now this is the exterior surface of the bone, star child. Needs some explanation. You've all heard the story that our bodies change out completely every 7 years, have you not? We're new physical beings except for our brains. Our brains don't change, but every other part of us changes out within every 7 years. And the way it's done with bone is through these lacunae. Some of them are where the cells here transfer over, slide over, it's amazing, and go in to be destroyed, to be recycled. And others of these holes are where the new ones come up to replace, right? Absolutely essential. Got to have them. Got to have them if you're going to be a primate on this planet. Lamb up. So if this is a deformity, where'd they go? What's that about? Now, talking about the bone earlier, it's half as thick or less, weighs half as much, but it's very, very different. This is human bone composition and a mass spectrometer. The spikes are at carbon, oxygen, phosphorus, and calcium. And the rest of them down here, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, like that. Look at star child. Big spike in carbon and oxygen, lower in phosphorus, lower in calcium, which means that it has a much higher level of collagen. Where's the highest the highest amount of collagen in your body? In your teeth. The star child's bone is made of tooth enamel. And as it turns out, it's much harder than normal human bone. Weighs half as much, half as thick, 2 or 3 times as hard. Big surprise. Big surprise. And that's the more common one. Okay, so progeria. Now, this is the latest fad among the skeptics and the experts. This is the one you'll read on Wikipedia. I've hammered them so hard on the cradle boarding and hydrocephaly. They've rallied behind this because it's so exotic and so weird. You've probably heard of it. When a kid is born with this, male or female, in the womb they start aging rapidly. And they'll generally die before the age of 10 or 12, like that, because they're aging at a very accelerated rate. So, but still they're human beings. They have human eyes in human eye sockets, they have brow ridges, they have noses, they have ears, they have a neck, a normally placed neck, but a much smaller face, and the heads do look swollen because the face is so down, and the bones do thin out. There's no question. So it has some of the things that the star child has, but it also has the roundness. It doesn't have the creases and do all that stuff. And more importantly, the bones, as they thin out, what happens to the bones of old people? They get brittle. They do thin out, but they get brittle and weak and they break. And that's what happens to these kids. They're very fragile. And so there's the star child with its bone 2 or 3 times as hard, and they're still trying to say it's progeria, just because they have to come up with something to explain it. They just can't acknowledge that they've got a real problem explaining this thing. Okay, getting serious again. 2 things in the star child's skull are not found in any other creature on Earth. It has unknown fibers that are embedded in the matrix of its bone, and it has unknown red residue is in its cancellous holes. Now I'm going to explain that, but keep in mind, not found in any other species on Earth. All right? Now this is the cuts in the skulls for the DNA testing. We'll talk about that later. But the star child on the left, human on the right, just to again show you the difference in the thickness of the bone. And yet the star child is much harder. It's very dramatic, as you can see. So what we're going to be talking about is what got cut out of here and put under a scanning electron microscope. And when it was, they saw this and they said, well, what the heck are those? They are fibers buried in the matrix of the bone, pulled out by a Dremel blade. A Dremel blade is a blade, a high-speed blade used to cut bone out, and it would cut your finger off like it wasn't there. Probably cut your arm off. Dremel blade. They are bad news, and yet these fibers resisted the blade. Not entirely, but some of them did. Punium. And when you look at this knot here, this is really amazing because you can see there are different kinds of these fibers. Now, first thought is, well, maybe there's something that grew on it, like molds or fungus or, bacteria, something. But you take it to a mycologist, as we did, took it actually to a group of them. They said, no, we've never seen anything like that. That you can see that's coming out of the matrix of the bone itself. You can see this one got caught in this one, which is a different kind, and sort of this wrapped up, but you see it tracks right through here and comes on up. And you can see kind of damage to it from the blade. These are hairs coming out of here, yet a different kind. And this is the third kind. This is a flat kind, and it was snagged on this rough piece of bone here, but look at the end of it, shredded. The Dremel blade did not cut through it like it would have done to my finger. It shredded it. My finger would not shred if a Dremel blade hit it. Okay? So, strong, very, very strong. It's like rebar in concrete to make that skull even harder than being tooth enamel. This is a hard skull. So, here's one of those fibers caught. We were just scanning around, and when they saw that, they said, hold on, go back to that. Oh my God, there it is. I mean, there is no better proof than that right there. In the matrix of the bone. Unknown in any other creature on Earth. Okay, now this is bones cut but not polished. When you run the Dremel blade, you see the marks of the blade, circular blade cutting through, you can see it. Well, this white stuff, this powder here, is the bone powder that the blade is chewing up and, kind of putting in the air when you cut. Okay, powder. But you can also break off pieces of the bone and polish them very carefully, like with lapidary tools, like jewelry. And this is what human bone looks like. It looks like alabaster. It's beautiful, really, it's beautiful. And these holes, this is the same hole, it's so big that you have to put it on two frames. But you see, each of these holes is crystal clear. Why? Because when you die, out in the wild, in the open, not the way we die, in the wild, in the open, Mother Nature cleans her plate. Because if she didn't, we'd walk out of this building and there'd be 1,000-foot high piles of bones. Mother Nature cleans her plate. And she does it with bacteria, fungi, mold, and she will break you down to your constituent elements in just a few weeks. It's really astounding how fast. They've done filmings of animals decaying, and it's much faster than they thought it would be. But one of the things that works on you is a kind of bacteria that eats out all of your bone marrow. Every single drop of bone marrow goes, and as you can see, this is what's left, is shining holes. You could eat out of those after the bacteria, they're so clean. Okay? With the star child, not so. You've got this stuff. We don't know what it is, but you got plenty of it. And it's not bone marrow, because bone marrow, when it oxidizes, it goes black. It's not that. We don't know what it is. But there's plenty of it. I had one of these people that I talked to, and I was really challenging him and really sticking it to him and all that. He said, listen, I don't care if you stack up 10,000 of those differences. It does not matter. Why? None of the star child's physical differences means anything to mainstream scientists. They explain them all away with this line, which he said, nature can do anything. I have the perfect answer against you, which is nature can do anything. It can produce any combination you can throw at me. I can rally it right back at you saying nature can do anything. The only thing nature can't do is fool around with DNA. Only DNA impresses mainstream scientists because DNA is the math of biology. It's their tool. It's their favorite weapon. So what that means is we get to run them through with their own sword. Isn't that cool? Run them through with their own sword. Like 2 + 2 = 4. DNA says what it says every time with undeniable precision. If we make our case with DNA analysis, we will win, and we can make our case with DNA. We know that now. It's been a long, hard slog that I'm going to tell you about, but we can do it. All right, here's how it works. You have to start paying attention now. Put the thinking cap on. For those of you who don't understand this, I'm going to make it clear. I'll go slow. Everything about the star child comes down to its DNA. All of the cells in our body, except the sex cells, blood cells, forget about that, 99.99%, the cells in our body have the same thing. A nucleus with all of our chromosomal package that we receive from our mothers and our fathers. 23 chromosomes from mom, 23 chromosomes for dad, make a combination of 46 chromosomes. You with me? The chromosomes are made up of genes, about approximately 30,000 genes. Okay? The genes are made up of the coiled strands of DNA. The coiled strands of DNA are made up of the nucleotides, ATCG, to make these things, which are base pairs. So he sent the samples, a few dozen of the Star Child shotgun recoveries, to the NIH, and sure enough, came back. Some of them were indeed human. Some of the Star Childs, this is a 265 base pair string, okay? But some of them, to their great surprise, a DNA segment 342 base pairs long, that's a pretty good size, proves some nuclear DNA is not human. No significant similarity found. See it? For reasons why I click here, and I'll explain. No significant similarity found. This means some of the star child's nuclear DNA cannot be found in the NIH database that contains trillions of base pair segments from thousands of species on Earth. Draw your own conclusions. Is that alien or is that not alien? What would you call that? I think it's alien. For reasons why I click here, this refers to a list of possible errors in the submission process. Our geneticist obtained the same results with multiple samples, so he has no doubt that he did them correctly. You do it enough and you get the same answer. You know you're doing it right. This is it, folks. This is history as big as history can be made. This is landing men on the moon. This is proving aliens exist. This is proving an alien was real 900 years ago and lived and died and was buried on this earth. Now, this is something else that he did. He's done this more recently. I said, well, can you do anything else besides that? So he did a spectrophotometer reading for human DNA and star child DNA. Now, this is it's just light passing through. You don't need to know what it is. This is the result. This is absolutely purified human DNA. This is what it's supposed to look like, or something close to that, right? And you can see the star child's does look. It's like I want to be human so bad, but I just can't quite make it, you know. But I'm human enough. You can kind of see it, just kind of not there, you know. But when he did it, ran it through electrophoresis analysis, the gel sheet, a different kind of gel sheet analysis, specifically for human. This is what perfect human looks like. Front edge, rear edge, and all this in between. So the star child should look something like this, and this is what it looked like. Nothing. He was very surprised. I mean, very surprised. I don't know what that means. It just means that more of it is different than we thought. Now, where are we now? Trying to figure out how it happened. How did it happen? Can humans and aliens procreate? All right? Can they get together and make a baby? Well, yes, if the difference between the two of their genomes falls within 3%. Why do we know that? Because a chimp and a human's genomes are 97 to 98% the same. You get arguments. Some people say it's 2% different. Some people say it's 3% different. I go with 3%. Let's just say 97% the same genome chimps have and we have. 3% difference. There is no way that a chimp and a human can make an offspring. So that we know that if this is happening, that has to fall within that 3%. All right? So I say to him, given what you have, where do you think the difference is going to be if we're talking procreation? He says, oh no, we're not talking procreation. The difference is going to be between 10 and 50%. Between 10 and 50%. Now that's a big margin. So very different that it's not even a question that it's an alien. In fact, it may be all alien except for the mother. Now I know what that sounds like. We're just speculating now. I know. She's saying, what? I was the same way. What? You know, but this is where it is. This is going to blow you away, but this is where we are right now. Subject to change. Subject to the loaf of bread. But this is what we're looking at with the small part that we have, the slice that we have right now. And on top of that, if everything evolved the way they say it did, we should have everything somewhere behind us, right? Of our 25 or 30,000 genes, we have 232 genes not found in any other species anywhere else on the planet. In any other species anywhere else on the planet. Where did they come from? You know what scientists say? Well, we must have been infected by some exotic bacteria that left their traces and then went away. Occam's razor. I have made fire. I have thought of a simple answer. You know? It's just ridiculous. Okay, so we're talking about if we can't have a sexual offspring, it has to be in vitro. The star child then turns out to probably be in vitro. If it's that big a difference, it couldn't be anything else. And we're doing that now, and it's test tube babies. You know how it works. It isn't that hard, so it wouldn't be for a higher race of beings to do it 900 years ago, or 9,000 years ago for that matter, or 200,000 years ago when we were created. All right, so I said, well, okay, how would it happen? How could it possibly happen that you have something that's so heavily alien, and you can look, there's nothing hardly left of the human in the skull, it's dominantly alien, but how can you get something so heavily alien coming out of a human mother? And so he said, well, maybe it's a three-parent birth. I said, what? Three-parent birth? What's that? Well, it sends me the slide. If a woman has what's called mitochondrial disease, that means her mitochondria are bad, and she has a child, that's a dead child. That's a horribly screwed up child. Now, if she wants to have more children and they know that she has mitochondrial disease and she and her partner want to have more children, well, what can they do? They can do this. It's incredible. They can take healthy nuclear DNA is removed from a patient's egg cell, leaving behind faulty mitochondrial DNA. This is bad mitochondria. They take out her sex cells, her 23, remember in the sex cells you have only 23 chromosomes to match with the cells from the sperm and make the 46. So you take out her 23 chromosomes that she's going to add to the zygote package, and they take a good egg from a woman who does not have mitochondrial disease, and they put it in, they take her genetic material out and they put hers in. So now she mixes with her partner's sperm and they make a zygote in the healthy egg with the healthy mitochondrial DNA. And this child is going to be born in her, out of her, and it's going to have the DNA, the nuclear DNA of her husband rather, or her partner, and herself, and it's going to have the mitochondrial DNA of the third parent. Is that not cool? Is that not cool? Yeah, I know, she's sitting there going, what? Yeah, it's goggle-eyed, isn't it? Yeah, I know, it's really, really cool. Now, with that in mind, how would an alien have been done like that? Well, what he said was you could have an alien couple. Why they would do this, and I'm not buying this entirely because it doesn't make sense to me, but why they would do it. But you could have an alien couple, make a zygote in vitro, take out the sex cells of a human, put it in, gestate it, and produce the star child out of a human mother. Now, it just makes no sense to me. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Now, if they're like us, if they're a lot like us, which, you know, the Greys, I don't know how much they're like us, but genetically, if everything's made out of those 4 nucleotides, they're probably a lot like us. And so that would explain the 10 to 50%. It begins to make sense, even though it's just still incredible. I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around it, and I know all of you are too, but nonetheless, this is where things are leaning right now. When I got the word of this, it was late March when he said, you've got it in the bag. You're going to make history, it's going to be a big deal, and we want to be involved. Start finding your money and getting it underway. We're ready to go. And so I live in Florida on the coast where you saw, and this is before the oil spill, so the oil spill gutted everybody. Our summer has just been horrible. Everybody that was in real estate or anything there just been horrible. So, but this was before then. So I said to this friend who's a deal maker, I said, do you know anybody that might be interested in this? And he said, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. He's 81 years old. He's in failing health. His wife is dead. He has horrible children that he hates. They're just going to take his money and just throw it away as soon as he's dead. And in America, you have to give them some. You can give a lot to charity, but you have to give them a certain amount, or they can sue you and sue the state and get it all. So anyway, he knew what he had to do. But he had told my friend, he said, look, I would give anything if I could just find something worthwhile to put my money into that would leave a lasting legacy of good other than these horrible children that I've produced. He said, I just don't want to die as another rich old fart on a big pile of money. He says, anybody, that's common. Anybody can do that. I would love to leave something behind. And my friend remembered that. So I said, well, geez, why don't you tell him we've got something that's going to make a mark on history like few other things ever have. Let him know. And so we did. We did. And he told him, and he said, okay, the guy explained it fully, and he said, you tell those people that I'm going to check them out. And if they check out, if everything checks out, I'm going to do their deal. It sounds great to me. It sounds exactly like what I'm looking for. So he did that. Checked me out, checked out. We got Matt Richards already, so he's a film director from England, works for the BBC to do the documentaries. We can check him out. We're going to go to the lab, did that, talked to the geneticists, everything checked out, everything's fine. So a few weeks later, he goes to his attorney. 9:30 on a Monday morning, the attorney made a note. And he said, I want to do this deal. I'm convinced. They're legitimate. I want my name on it. Start the paperwork. That afternoon, he went home and he called some friends and told them about it. He was excited. He got too excited. 11:30 that night, he had a massive stroke and has not woke up from it yet. But we had to wait a couple months just to see. It would be very unseemly if we're out searching for the money and he wakes up out of the hyperbaric chamber and wants to do the deal. You see what I mean? So that's a true story. That's a true story. Now, I can't tell you what a body blow that was. I can't tell you how depressive it was. I can't tell you how hard it was. I've been knocked down a bunch with this thing, but boy, it was hard to get up from that leg. Because we had gone out and we had set everything in place. Going to film and we were going to move it and set up our business in Houston because Houston has all the medical facilities there. Best entertainment attorney in the South is in Austin, Texas. The camera crew that Matt Richards uses when he shoots in the States is located in Dallas-Fort Worth. Everything perfect. We lined it all up, ready to go, and he has the stroke. Hi, I'm Lloyd Pye. Many of you know me as the caretaker of the Star Child skull for the last 14 years. And during that time, you've been very helpful, very supportive, and I appreciate all that everyone has done to help move that project along. And now it's very far along, and we have it moving to a point where in the not too distant future, within the next few months, there's going to be a very big push in that direction. However, today I'm talking to you about a personal problem that I have. Today is July 21st, 2013. 5 days ago, on the 17th, I was informed by an oncologist that I have aggressive B-cell lymphoma. I have a tumor the size of a softball embedded in my upper abdomen. This has been a great shock to me, my family, my friends, because I'm not the kind of person one would expect that to happen to. I've always been a bit of a health nut. I've take vitamins every day, never smoke, don't drink. I've done what I thought were the right things to try to enjoy a long and productive life. And now that this has happened, I'm in a fight for my life now. And it's as I sit here 5 days later, after finding out, I can hardly believe it. And I'm sure many of you who know me will feel the same way. But nonetheless, that's the way it is. Again, I have an aggressive form of B-cell lymphoma, which means that it grows very fast. So time is short and I have to get on it. I am lucky that we happened to catch it early. I went on June 15th to an Ethiopian restaurant and I drank some cardamom tea
which activated my gallbladder and let me know that I had a gallbladder problem, and I do have a couple of stones in there. And from that, I went to a doctor on July 9th to check on my gallbladder, and he said, "You have a mass in here." I didn't know it. Doesn't hurt, couldn't feel it. Size of a softball, didn't know it. And so from there, we went to a sonogram, and the sonogram guy says, "Yep, bad news here." Went for a CAT scan next day. Oh yeah, big mass, bad news, inoperable. And then we did a biopsy, needle biopsy, 2-punch biopsies. No question, aggressive B-cell lymphoma. I'm still in shock. I still can't believe it's me. There's a kind of dissociation that goes on where I talk about this as if I'm talking about somebody else, and I'm talking about me. So if you can help, if you will help, please go to www.lloydpye.com, and I will thank you very much, and I will let everybody know as I progress through a blog that I'll be creating soon. Thank you.
On July 21st of this year, Pye posted this video on his Facebook page. In the video, he spoke about his plans to search for alternative healing practices outside the U.S. His nephew then posted this message on December 9th. This is Lloyd's nephew. Lloyd Pye passed away at approximately 6:15 p.m. Central Time, USA. Lloyd was surrounded by family and died in his mother's arms. The family is asking for privacy at this time as we deal with the loss. We will post additional information in the near future. Thank you to all his friends and fans for your support, prayers, and love. He loved you all deeply. That message was then followed by this one. We have had requests for a way to send cards and letters to the family. Cards and letters can be sent to Lloyd's family, care of Byron S. Stone, P.O. Box 1413, Destin, Florida 32540.
All of the big fundamental things that our reality is built on, that our world is built around, all of those are fundamentally flawed and wrong.
Lloyd Pye truly had a gift for taking complex information and delivering that information in a way that everyone could understand. His enthusiasm for his work was infectious, and it was something he held on to until the very end.
I don't know anybody in the world that's got doing more exciting work than I'm doing. Certainly they have more exciting jobs maybe, or better paying jobs and all that, but I am in the middle of, I know, making history at a level that history is very seldom made, and so that is as exciting as it gets. It really is.
Can't really keep dismissing it all as sort of fantasies of the mind or sexual fantasy.
When we see DNA evidence in the hair of something that doesn't match up with what we would expect to be, old Gaelic DNA mixed with Chinese DNA in blonde hair, the storylines don't add up unless we start to invoke the idea of abduction and genetic interbreeding going back for many thousands of years, all the way to the dawn of history.
Your voice, or its voice, said it was God. What do you believe?
I believe it's hard, but I believe the things I've seen, the presence I felt inside of me is beyond anything you can imagine. It was hopelessness. So it cannot be God, but it can pretend to be.